Remember when you were a child, how many questions you asked of your parents, of siblings, of anyone who you could get to listen to you, and even those who didn't want to. Question after question after question for hours, all day, every day. And through no fault of their own, obviously, our parents and society trained us out of that pretty quickly, just to save themselves from getting constant migraines, I'm sure. The point is, we used to ask a lot of questions, but then we kind of stopped. It becomes unfashionable, let's say, at a certain age. We learn to act like we've got it together, like we know what we're doing. It's childish to be so inquisitive. Does it really matter? Why are you asking all these questions? But I really think there's something there. Because children are so hungry to know, to discover. And when you tell them, no, you can't do that, or this doesn't work, then they go, why? In other words, why not? Why couldn't it? And as adults, oftentimes, some sort of lackluster, off-the-cuff answer would be given, maybe with no actual thought put in. And we learn as children, gradually, to stop asking because those around us either don't know the answers, don't want to know the answers, don't want to tell us the answers, or in some way we are doing something that is unapproved of in this place at this time. But questions are so valuable. They help us to think about things differently. They help us to assess things in ways that we might not have if we're just thinking about them in a regular fashion. And I'm specifically talking about asking questions of ourselves. Because what we've kind of been trained into, and are often unconscious of it, is we'll ask a question to ourselves and we'll immediately answer with a programmed response. A programmed response that we were taught by society. Something like, oh no, that would be too hard, or you couldn't do that, or who does that, or that's silly, or there's no scientific evidence for that. I don't care what the response is. Before the question and the natural answer has had time to marinate, it's already been undermined by a programmed smackdown. That's not something we should continue to encourage within ourselves. It's important to start asking questions of ourselves and allowing ourselves to give an answer. And we may not have a full and final answer for the question, but it gets the juices flowing. It helps us to retrain ourselves into a practice of thinking about things differently. I think, what if is a good beginning to a question. How about is another one. So I encourage you to try and use these. Think of anything and watch yourself. You will find yourself going into pre-programmed areas. You'll be like, what if I could be a millionaire? And just try and feel the energy around that and feel how kind of flat and already done before that question is. I'm talking about getting way out of the box. And even now, as I sit here talking about this, nothing is exactly coming to mind for me because we don't even know how in the box we are. This is a thought exercise. It helps one to understand how much we're traveling in narrow thought channels that aren't necessary. They're limitations that we've allowed to be imposed upon ourselves that we can relax and release and open out of. We need to ask bigger questions of ourselves because we're so convinced we know the answers, and yet that can't be the case because it has to get better than this. So yeah, think of outrageous questions to ask yourself. Think of things like, and do better than me, but things like, what if I were to live my life entirely different from anything I've ever seen before or anything that was suggested to me as the way one should live life in this modern era? What might that look like? Now, you may not actually want the answer to that question, but you might find many good answers along the way to that final answer. For example, you may not want to completely live in an outrageous fashion, but while you're exploring that question, you might think of something so out of the box, but so achievable and doable for you that you wouldn't have thought of if you hadn't given yourself such a gargantuan thought task. Remember, aside from those of us who are winning in this realm, those of us who are manipulating and working the system and creating selfish gain, aside from those people, the rest of us are not stoked on this place. We see and know the potential. We realize that it could be great and it could be wonderful, but it isn't right now. And we need to find ways within ourselves to make it what it could be, because it starts with the individual. And if we want to get out of the box, we have to start thinking outside of the box and asking questions of yourself and really letting yourself tell yourself the answers is one way to do that.